The concept of the interest rate is the most sophisticated tool of psychological and economic enslavement ever devised by the ruling class, acting as a time-value predator that systematically strips the individual of their future autonomy by convincing them to discount the value of their upcoming years in exchange for immediate, low-quality gratification. To understand the world as an architect, you must realize that an interest rate is not a neutral financial metric. It is the price of time. When you borrow money to fund a lifestyle you have not yet earned, you are not just taking a loan from a bank. You are conducting a temporal raid on your future self, stealing the energy, labor, and freedom of the man you will be in 10 years to satisfy the cravings of the soft man you are today. The banking cartel understands the hyperbolic discounting of the human brain, our primitive evolutionary bias to prioritize a small reward now over a massive reward later, and they have built a multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure to weaponize this weakness against you. By setting the cost of money, they are essentially setting the cost of your life. If the interest rate is low, they seduce you into debt serfdom with the promise of easy credit. If the interest rate is high, they crush your ability to build equity, ensuring you remain a rent seeker in their domain. In either scenario, the bank sits at the apex of the hourglass, collecting a time tax on every hour you spend working to pay back the principal plus the compounded interest. You are not working for dollars. You are working to buy back the minutes of your life that you already sold to the bank the moment you signed the loan agreement. You must internalize the math of amortization, which is the financial guillotine of the middle class. When you take out a 30-year mortgage, the bank structures the payment schedule so that in the first decade, you are paying almost exclusively interest and virtually zero principal. This is front-loaded theft. For the first 120 months of your labor, you are essentially a tenant in a house you think you own, paying rent to the bank while they hold the title. They are capturing the highest energy years of your life, your 30s and 40s, when your productivity is at its peak, and ensuring that the vast majority of that output is redirected into their coffers. The soft men celebrate their home ownership while oblivious to the fact that over 30 years, they will pay for the house 3 times over, once in principal and twice in interest. This is the tripling effect of the interest rate. The bank did not build the house. They did not lay the bricks. They did not sweat in the sun. They simply moved digital bits on a screen to create the currency, and in exchange, they have claimed 30 years of your biological existence. This is the modern equivalent of feudal labor, where the serf worked the lord's land for 3 days a week just for the privilege of surviving on the other 4. The only difference is that the modern serf thinks he is a customer. Furthermore, the interest rate is a psychological control dial used to manage the compliance of the population. When the central bank lowers interest rates to near zero, ZIRP, zero interest rate policy, they are intentionally destroying the incentive to save. They are sending a signal to your lizard brain. Do not build a fortress. Do not accumulate capital. Do not be independent. Spend everything now. Borrow more. Become dependent on the flow. This creates a consumption fever where the masses buy depreciating assets, cars, electronics, fast fashion, on credit, effectively liquefying their future stability for a dopamine hit. By destroying the yield on savings, the system forces the honest man out of his safe harbor and into the risk curve, making him gamble in the stock market or real estate just to keep pace with inflation. This keeps the population in a state of permanent financial fragility. A man with $100,000 in a high-yield savings account is dangerous to the system because he has stay-away power. He can quit his job, he can start a business, he can think for himself. A man with $100,000 in debt and a monthly interest payment that consumes 40% of his income is a compliant slave. He cannot protest, he cannot pivot, he cannot say no. He is tethered to the treadmill by the invisible chain of the interest rate. The bank does not want you to be wealthy. They want you to be servicing debt forever. A debt-free man is a ghost to the system. A man in debt is a biological battery that they can drain for decades. The second layer of your economic imprisonment is the nominal illusion, a psychological sleight of hand where the banking cartel uses the spread between the stated interest rate and the actual rate of inflation to conduct a massive, invisible transfer of wealth from your labor to their balance sheets. You must understand that the nominal interest rate, the 5%, 7%, or 18% printed on your credit card statement or mortgage contract, is a distraction designed to keep the soft men focused on the small numbers while the system ignores the real interest rate. The real interest rate is the nominal rate minus the rate of currency debasement, inflation. And in the environment of 2026, the system has engineered a negative real return for the masses. When the bank pays you 4% on your savings, but the government expands the money supply by 15%, you are not earning money. You are losing 11% of your purchasing power every single year, just for the privilege of letting the bank hold your capital. This is financial repression, a deliberate policy of stealing from the savers to pay off the debts of the sovereigns. The honest man thinks he is building a nest egg, but he is actually watching his future evaporate in a slow-motion fire. The architect, however, understands the debt arbitrage that the elite use to multiply their wealth. While the middle class is terrified of debt, viewing it as a burden, the ruling class views debt as a weapon of mass accumulation. If you are a sovereign lord, you do not save money. You borrow money to buy hard assets. When inflation is higher than the interest rate on your loan, the debt is effectively melting away. If you borrow $10 million at 5% to buy an apartment complex and inflation is 10%, you are being paid 5% a year to hold that debt. The value of the asset rises with inflation, the rent rises with inflation, but the nominal debt stays fixed in the past. You are paying back the bank with cheaper dollars, currency that has less purchasing power than the currency you originally borrowed. This is how the rich short the currency. They bet against the dollar by holding massive amounts of fixed-rate debt backed by productive assets. The soft men are long the currency. They hold cash and wages, which are the very things being destroyed. In 2026, the interest rate is the fence that keeps the sheep in the saving pen, while the wolves use the borrowing gate to capture the world's remaining resources. Furthermore, we must address the tax asymmetry of interest. In the rigged code of the modern state, the interest you earn on your savings is taxed as ordinary income at the highest possible rate, but the interest the corporation pays on its debt is tax deductible. This creates a massive structural incentive for the architect to remain in a state of permanent leverage. The system punishes the man who tries to be debt-free by taxing his every move, while it rewards the man who stays indebted by giving him tax breaks. This is the debt spiral of the proletariat. The middle class takes on consumer debt, high-interest loans for things that go down in value, cars, clothes, vacations. This debt is toxic, it has no tax benefits, and it compounds against you. The architect takes on investment debt, low-interest loans for things that go up in value, real estate, businesses, Bitcoin. This debt is medicinal, it has massive tax benefits, and it compounds in your favor. The soft man is a slave to his credit card. The architect is a master of his credit line. You must stop viewing debt through the lens of morality and start viewing it through the lens of mathematics. If the interest rate is lower than the rate of inflation plus the rate of asset appreciation, then not being in debt is a form of financial negligence. The final component of this trap is the risk-free rate fallacy. The bankers tell you that government bonds, treasuries, are the risk-free rate, the benchmark for all other investments. This is a linguistic trap. In 2026, there is no such thing as a risk-free investment. There are only return-free risks. When you buy a government bond, you are lending money to the most profligate, indebted, and incompetent entity in history, the state, and you are accepting a return that is guaranteed to be lower than the actual rate of inflation. You are essentially paying the government for the honor of losing your money slowly. The smart poor man puts his money in safe bonds because he is afraid of the volatile stock market or the risky crypto market. He fails to realize that the safe option is a 100% guaranteed loss of purchasing power over time. The volatile assets are the only ones with the potential to outrun the printing press. The interest rate is the siren song that lures the cautious into the rocks of destitution. To survive, you must abandon the search for safety and start the search for yield. You must realize that the bank's interest is the bait, but the principal is the hook. They want to keep you nibbling on the 4% yield while they swallow your 100% principal through the debasement of the unit of account. The final breakthrough in mastering the psychology of the interest rate is the total annihilation of the monthly payment mindset, a cognitive prison designed by the banking industry to keep you focused on the affordability of the installment rather than the total cost of the servitude. You must realize that the question, how much is it per month, is the calling card of a permanent peasant. It is a confession that you do not possess capital. You only possess a stream of future labor that you are willing to parcel out to a master. The banking cartel loves the monthly payment because it hides the compounded devastation of the interest rate behind a small digestible number that fits within your wage. The soft men shop for cars, houses, and even vacations by looking at their monthly cash flow, never calculating that by the time the 72-month car loan or the 360-month mortgage is finished, they have surrendered years of their life to pay for the privilege of convenience. The architect, however, operates on the total cost of ownership and the opportunity cost of capital. He understands that every dollar sent to a bank in interest is a dollar that cannot be put to work in his own empire, compounding for his own bloodline. The interest rate is a negative compound interest. While the wealthy enjoy the eighth wonder of the world, compounding gains, the poor are crushed by its inverted twin, compounding debt. To achieve the freedom constant, you must first undergo a debt detox, ruthlessly eliminating what I call high-velocity debt, credit cards, payday loans, and high-interest consumer credit. This is the financial equivalent of a sucking chest wound. No matter how much you earn, you will bleed out if these rates, often 20% to 30%, are left open. The architect knows that paying off a 25% credit card is the mathematical equivalent of finding a 25% guaranteed tax-free investment return, an opportunity that does not exist anywhere else in the market. Once the consumer shackle is broken, you move into the state of financial neutrality, where you own your time and your tools outright. Only from this position of strength can you pivot to aggressive leverage. The soft man uses leverage to buy things he can't afford to impress people he doesn't like. The architect uses leverage to buy cash flow that he can't afford to pass up. He uses the bank's own money to buy the assets that will eventually pay off the very loan he took, creating a self-liquidating engine of wealth. He turns the interest rate from a predator into a domestic animal that works for him. The ultimate psychological shift is the transition from borrower to lender. In the global economy, you're either the one paying interest or the one receiving it. There is no middle ground. The soft men spend their lives on the wrong side of the ledger, paying the ignorance tax of the interest rate because they lack the discipline to save and the courage to invest. The architect structures his life to be on the yield side of the equation. He owns the debt of others. He owns the equities that benefit from inflation. He owns the Bitcoin that cannot be debased. He becomes the bank. By accumulating hard assets and productive capital, you are effectively charging the rest of the world for the use of your resources. You stop asking, how much can I borrow, and start asking, how much yield can I capture? This is the sovereign pivot. When you stop being a consumer of credit and start being a supplier of value, the interest rate starts working in your favor, pulling wealth toward you while you sleep. The monthly payment that used to be your nightmare becomes your passive income stream. The system is designed to keep you in a state of constant refinancing, a cycle where you never actually own anything because you're always rolling your debt into a new, better loan. They want you to be a permanent debtor to the corporate state complex. You must break the cycle by declaring temporal independence. Refuse to trade your future for a present you haven't earned. The soft men buy the luxury car on credit today and spend the next 5 years of their life paying for it. The architect buys the luxury car in cash 5 years from now, using the profits from the assets he built today. One man is a slave to the machine. The other is a master of time. The interest rate is the filter that separates the two. It rewards the patient and punishes the impulsive. It elevates the architect and enslaves the soft man. Your first step to freedom is not a higher salary. It is the total refusal to pay a single cent of interest on anything that does not produce more money than it costs. You must stop being a battery and start being the grid. The gate is open, but only for those who have the discipline to walk through it without a credit card in their hand.